Councilmember Sanchez. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6:05 p.m., February 25th, 2025. Let's briefly stand for a moment of silence and an invocation by Councilmember Garcia, if that's okay with you.
I'm sorry. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for making each of us in this room, every person we meet, every citizen of the city, and every city we can imagine with dignity and infinite worth. We thank you for calling to have given us everyone good stewards of your creation, love our neighbors and ourselves, make sure we make good decisions based on others' needs and not ours. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. And please remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. Madam Clerk, calling the roll is not on the agenda, but should we just call the roll just so that we have a record of who's here?
Absolutely. Councilmember Fernandez.
Here.
Councilmember Cuadra Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Hertzberg.
Present.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Present.
Vice Mayor Morera.
Present.
And Mayor Dieguez had notified us that he will join the meeting a little bit late.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to provide public comment, this is the time to approach the podium. And Madam Clerk, you can go ahead and provide the public comment instructions.
Good evening and welcome to the town of Miami Lakes. This is a workshop, and again, if you're here for public comments, please just approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes. And if you're attending this meeting via online as well, we welcome you to this meeting. And if you want to provide public comments remotely, the only thing you need to do is press on the asterisk number 9, and IT will allow you to join the meeting. And IT, I don't see anyone, but please let us know if there is anyone attending virtually for public comments so that we all know. No public comments virtually. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That being said, anyone in the room that would like to provide public comments? Going once, going twice. All righty, we got one. Come on up, Ms. Lucis. I was staring at you. I was peer pressuring you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Claudia Luces, 8220 Menteith Terrace. Just a quick question. I was looking at this, and I know that in the back, there is I forgot what page. I'm trying to thumb through it now. The preliminary budget. Show me. Where is it? Get me together. There we go. Thank you. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, so I'm looking at, I guess, what is an itemized list of what are the improvements. So all of the improvements that are in here are documented here. I just want to confirm that all of these improvements that we're seeing attached here are itemized here.
You're getting ahead of the presentation.
I'm sorry. I'm efficient like that. You know, it's like Doge for Miami Lakes. Yeah. What can I tell you?
I think that as the presentation goes through, and if there's any question, you're going to get all of that answered.
Right, just so I can follow through, because I'm sure there's a lot of numbers. So since it's not here, that's what I wanted to ask, to make sure that maybe we could get an itemized list of the stuff as well.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, that was it for my public comments. Thank you, Vice Mayor Moreta, for inspiring me.
All right, that being said, anyone else for public comment? Public comments, going once, going twice, closed. Madam Clerk, still no one on virtual, right?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, so public comments is now closed. Mr. Manager, you had something you wanted to say?
I just want to introduce the process. I know that there's a lot of new members here on the council, and these workshops happen from time to time, but they're obviously different than a council meeting. At these workshops, no action can be taken, right? So these are more informative to kind of give you information, seek direction from the council as to which way we want to go, and then if there's direction given by the council, then we would bring back legislative items to start moving in the direction of the direction that you gave us. So Jeremy's going to kick it off. He's going to go through an entire presentation. Afterwards, there'll be a question and answer period, and obviously we're both here to answer any questions at the end after he's gone through the presentation, and I think it should answer the majority of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And so, yeah, we'll move on to the opening of the workshop, and take it away, Mr. Bahun.
Good evening, council, manager, obviously, and then all the individuals here from the public. Jeremy Bagdown, Director of Parks and Recreation. As the manager alluded to, today we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about Optimist Park. This is our largest athletic site, obviously, that has served our community for 50 plus years. It is the site that has our only ball fields, where we have recreational and adult sports in for baseball and softball. The presentation that we're about to go over is going to talk a little bit about where we've come from in our discussions with Optimist Park, kind of the history of how decisions on the level of service and what we want to see out of the park. And it's mainly going to focus then on the transition of what are we going to do next and how we're going to get that completed. So as we go through this presentation, I have to go ahead and allude to the history there. So obviously the design and the idea to renovate this park actually kicked off in 2003. We saw the first conceptual rendering. We went again in 2011 and then went ahead and talked a little bit further about it. We had another design firm come out and get us a little bit more of a specific idea of how we wanted to reorganize the fields and its layouts. Fast forward to 2018, this is where we go ahead and actually contract a design firm out to start looking at what these actual conceptual will look like and aiming towards getting to developing construction plans and actually developing the parcel. We go ahead in 2022 and approve the site plan. So that was the same site plan that went out for the bond question. That was the site plan that was at the time estimated around $19.5 million. We later then saw at the end of 2022, the bond question then fails. Knowing that the park still needed renovations, knowing there was still a need for our community in this park, we went ahead and took a look at phasing this development, phasing this plan so that it wasn't a one-time lump sum, it wasn't a one-time taxation in order to fund these improvements. We took a look at state, federal appropriations, phasing the project, breaking it into manageable pieces while still managing the construction aspect that if we start one area, can't touch that area and move to the next without re-interrupting. That took place in 2023, and it puts us here now, all right? And as I'm sure we can all agree, there are things now that we are looking to do. We've talked a lot recently about the funding of Optimist, keeping the funds back in there, and what can we get done and what is manageable, all right? So knowing all that, this is the proposed site plan that now we are looking to evaluate. This is the plan where we are looking to, for purposes of naming it, this is the design in place approach. We will be looking at leveraging the amenities that we had discussed that were approved in the previous site plan, but keeping the field orientation in its current position. This would help reduce some of the moving of utilities, changing of poles, and allow us to leverage the level of improvements versus the dollars needed to actually see some of those improvements on the field. So as you can see from the site plan here, all 7 fields would be completely redone, including the grading, drainage, irrigation, fencing, backstops, dugouts, the shade structures for parents, adding some of the amenities that are not currently there, like the entire accessible pathway throughout, adding exercise stations, and then rehabbing some of the sport courts, so our basketball courts, the tennis courts, and the parking lots in some of these cases. So this is the site plan. This is the majority of of the 3 goals that we're looking at today to kind of discuss, and this should be more of a discussion once I get through talking here, is to, 1, agree to the site plan, agree to the level of amenities that we kind of want to start to move forward with. 2 is talk about what is year 1, what can we do now funding-wise, and what that completion list can be. And 3 is looking at what the remainder would be and what is I guess a palatable source of a level of funding from years 2 on. All right. So taking a look at the strategic phasing, what does this plan, this current site plan, allow us to do? So we'll be able to apply logical sequencing. The biggest thing of this site plan is in the first year and at the beginning of whatever strategy we end up using as far as implementation is the development of all construction documents for the entire property. So by starting with this, while we are looking to still phase the actual enhancements, this is going to allow us to at least know what our guiding principle is on what constructually, what actual developed plans are allowable. And then this plan is going to then allow us to create incremental upgrades to the park. Funding can be a little lower some year, a little higher some years, but we still have a guiding principle on what is the actual plans that are going to be executable. All right. It also allows us to have coordinated implementation, to coordinate and implement and minimize disruption to the areas. It will allow us to also not have interruptions to our programming. Because we are looking at doing certain sections at a time, this is going to allow us to go ahead and limit the amount of closures needed for programming and limit the amount of closures for anyone generally looking to use the park for any type of recreational use. It's also going to go ahead and obviously the biggest thing that we'll probably discuss is the cost consciousness. We're going to focus on the amenities that in their current position. We're going to leverage whatever can be retrofitted. We're going to leverage keeping the fields in their current condition, not having to move so much utilities to keep that cost down. And then the last thing, and probably the most important thing is, and I kind of alluded to it already, is it's going to be adaptable and flexible. Depending on what we can spend, what we do have an appetite for, we can implement then, and we can change along the way. So I kind of talked about it a little earlier, but overall improvements to the plan, it's going to incorporate the 7 ball fields, a restroom facility out in the center of the park, waste receptacles along the walkway, new dugouts, bleachers with shade structures, exercise stations, the walking path, resurfaced parking lot. As we get into the construction and design, we'll also look at any type of increased capacity we can have on parking. That is not anticipated right now in some of this presentation, but it is something that we're keeping on our radar. It is the inclusion of an airnasium, upgrading all of the sports field lighting throughout all of the park, and landscaping throughout the park. Looking at some of these improvements and what do they entail, a little bit more defined here. So ball field improvements will include backstops, fencing, bleachers with shade structure dugouts, the field drainage improvements, landscaping and trees, LED retrofitted lights, so we would keep the existing poles that are concrete and just leverage the changing of fixtures and all the conduits and electrical needed to house the new fixtures. Walking paths, and then the restroom building. You can see there, I know we've talked about it, but I want to just make sure the goal here is to utilize, once again on the cost-conscious side, a prefabricated restroom facility, roughly 30 by 26, if I'm not mistaken, and you'll see the image there at the bottom of what we're looking at proposing. General exercise, so the walking path, once again, the waste receptacles and exercise stations throughout the entire park. The other thing there is also you'll see there's landscaping. The landscaping is more so meant to just add either protection and or shade to new areas where we might have more traffic. So if there isn't any shade near any of the exercise stations that we're proposing, we would be placing trees, palms in that vicinity to go ahead and add some shade. The sport court improvements include the airnasium over 2 of the basketball courts. And then once again, creating connectivity with landscaping and walking paths to and from it. Parking and tennis courts, so once again, resurfacing the existing tennis court parking lot, changing out all of the fencing in the pickleball and tennis courts, adding the new hardscaped area in the center, so more of a communal area for those that are playing to rest out of the sun, and creating a little bit more areas for staging and waiting in between games. So that is pretty much the site plan, the proposed level of improvements. Now the question is, how are we looking to get there? This is going to be our recommendation. Obviously, it's always going to be contingent on what the master construction plans allow us to do once we actually go ahead and get to that stage. But this would be what we call our prototype field and restroom. So in year one, the goal here is to A, develop the master construction documents, but B, also show what an entire redeveloped field would be while still addressing some of the immediate priority items. In this case being the dugouts, the sports field lighting, and the restroom building. So we would be adding a pathway from the tennis court parking lot directly out to field 5, adding the restroom facility, updating all the sports field lighting on fields 5, but also in phase 1, taking care of field 1 that still has the remaining wooden poles. And then going ahead and adding the bleachers with shade structures for the parents. Once again, this is the prototype. This is what we anticipate could be used almost as a glimpse into what the rest of the park and fields can be, while still taking care of some of the major priority items up front. I believe I had one question. In year 1 would only be for field 5.
The amenities that he's talking about for one field, they would be eventually for all the fields as we get to them.
Right, but on here it says features with shade, but the sports lighting, he specified field 1 and 5, so I didn't know if you meant.
Yeah, because field 1, which is the big one on the southwest corner of the baseball fields, is the only one left that has wooden poles, which many of them are deteriorating. One fell last year that we had to take down. So while we're working on field 1, all of the amenities, we would go ahead and also in phase 1 do the poles and lights for field number 1.
Yeah. So what's the strategy behind kind of our ideology of this phase 1? The actions incorporated here, obviously, once again, I'm going to continue going back to this because it is going to be what tells us what can and can't be done, is going to be completing the master construction documents for the entirety of the project. This also allows us, once again, to develop the prototype field, which includes the full upgrade of field 5, installing a restroom building, and creating sidewalk access. This is also, as we just discussed now shortly, removes the last remaining wooden poles that have posed some safety issues in the past. Once again, the development of phase 1 is always going to be contingent on the construction documents. The rationale on how we decided on this was it provides an immediate implementation of various top priority items. It demonstrates committed alignment with the community. Field 5 is currently the most used field for our recreational baseball. Our highest participation rate is in 8U baseball at this time. And it adds a visual model for future phases and enhancements to the most used ball field. So year 1 is based off of current funds, and we'll get to the numbers side, which I'm sure no one wants to talk about today right now. We'll talk about the numbers now, but the goal of phase 1 is to get a prototype done. Then thereafter, years 2 plus, we're looking at an approach that can be implemented on an elemental basis. Depending on the element, we will look at tackling holistically. Maybe portions of a ball field, may not be. So in the priority that we have ranked, this is kind of the element-based approach that we will continue for years 2 and forward. So infrastructure and earthworks, starting from the ground up. Anything required for drainage, anything required for irrigation system, sod, clay, and that nature. Then moving to LED sports field lighting. This is retrofitting all the existing fields on their current concrete poles. This is probably one of the only elements that have a more upfront ROI on them immediately. Obviously, sports field lighting we currently use are metal halide, not as efficient as far as energy consumption. So one thing we would see was the reduced amount of energy needed, obviously our cost for that energy. But not only that, one of the bigger highlights is going to be the majority of these sports field companies are coming with 15, 20-year, 25-year warranties for parts and labor. So looking at what the savings over 25 years of what we're currently spending on repairs could amount to a pretty penny itself. So on top of that, you also have the increased visibility and the enhancements to the lighting levels on the fields for play. After that, we can then go look at the ball field work, which is backstops, fencing, dugouts, concrete pads needed for those dugouts, shade bleachers, their concrete pads, warning track clay. Moving on to a larger use, maybe a base outside of just our programs, but actual just overall communal use. And community use is going to be the general exercise and wellness components, the walking pathway in its entirety, exercise stations, trash receptacles, and the bollards along the Pinto field as well. Parking improvements, so resurfacing of existing parking lots, and obviously as we get these construction documents, as we continue to work this through, looking where we can add more parking on the property. Then we move on to sport court improvements, which is the gymnasium installation, tennis court improvements, and then finally landscaping. I'm going to say it again, and I feel I've said this enough, but the proposed phased approach is always going to be based on construction documents. So while this is our current proposed approach, there are other approaches that we can talk about, field specifically and so forth, but we feel this may be the best way in chunks to take care of the entire project.
A question for you, Jeremy. It looks here as if there would be room for at least 2 different free play areas for families that just want to go, toss the football around, or kids that live in the town that may just want to play on the weekends. Is there a reason why that was not included in the redesign proposal?
Which spaces are we alluding to here?
Not looking at any phases. I'm just looking at, I think it's, at least based on what's printed out here, it's slide 3, page 3. It looks like, again, I think it's Pinto B right in the back there. It looks like there's a big, yeah.
Are we talking about the church fields? The southern?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like there would be room there for some kind of free play area, and then same thing when you look up to the northwestern quadrant between those 2 fields, it looks like there could be room for something there.
Mayor, since we have transitioned to a design in place, in other words, that the ball fields will not be rearranged. They'll be developed or redeveloped in the same location that they currently are. The green space that exists, almost all of it will still exist after this methodology.
But my whole point is, why can't we, for example, actually, because I know, having played there before, sometimes there are divots, whatever you want to call them, if somebody wants to just play there and toss the football, they can twist their ankle on. Why can't we just flatten it, make it one elevation, improve it in some way where, again, for people that just want to go and have a good time there.
So it is used for not only that, but it's also used for organized play. So it's going to come down to dollars and increasing the budget in order to meet that.
That's fine, but so far, I think from what I saw here, we're looking at $5 million, right, compared to the $20 million or so that we're looking at paying before. So I think it's feasible. And then my big thing, as everybody might recall, right, when I was kind of upset with the price tags that we're, basically about to engage in order to, improve these fields, is that, we weren't accounting for families like mine when I was growing up that didn't have access to these fields, right? We had to go to Lakes on the Green, we had to go to PSN, to enjoy these fields that we pay for. And so, I would like to see something included there relating to that. I think this is a great plan from what I've seen so far on the surface. Obviously, I have to take a deep dive on it. I think it's a major improvement. Kudos to Councilwoman Ruano as well, who kind of also had pushed for a version of this before. But I think we're on the right track here. I think, look, we've gotten the price tag to under $5 million. I think having, some additional plans, again, not that it's a priority, but in the future to also improve those areas, and so our other families can use it for more than just using the exercise trail and everything. I think that would be a win-win, complete win-win for everybody, and for under $10 million.
Yeah, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not sure if you missed this, Mayor, before you got here, is the thought process here was the first year in phase 1 to develop like a prototype, right? So one baseball field, the one in the center of the park, that would be completely done from top to bottom, all of the elements, the shade structure, the dugouts, the fencing, the irrigation, and the lighting, and the bathroom facility that would be right next to that. the walkway from the parking area that would lead to that field and the restroom facility. And then from years 2 and on could be done the way Jeremy kind of laid out here. It could be done element by element, which the first priority under his priority
plan,
list
yeah.
is the earthwork, right? So that's where that could be done, not only for the baseball fields, but in the open green space too.
Yeah, because I'm not even talking about creating a brand new like baseball field or anything
Understand.
in those gaps, but just like make it in a way where if you wanted to just go there and just play a pickup game of football with your friends or flag football, whatever the case might
Understood.
be, you have access to that.
Understood. And I'm not sure if that was completely communicated. Years 2 and on can be, based on the preference of the council, can be done one of two ways. Either it could be done the way we've laid it out here, which is element by element, or we can choose to say, okay, we're going to do field number 2 next, and just do another field top to bottom like we did the first field. We thought it was important to get that prototype field and get the restroom and get that vision set in the center of the park. And then from that point forward, we can go, option A would be, like we've described here, which would probably be more cost efficient, because when we bring in heavy equipment to do one element, we do the whole park. When we come in and do all the fencing, we do the whole park. It's probably going to be more cost efficient to do it like that, from years 2 and on. But if we wanted to do field by field and do it top to bottom and then move on to the next field the following year, we have that option, that flexibility to do that. And I think that's what Jeremy was alluding to with that flexibility based on funding, based on priorities, based on this council. But absolutely, the green area, the open green space that is between the fields will be taken into account.
Yeah, no, and I just want to be clear. I'm not at all knocking the plan. I'm not knocking, anything that's been said so far. I just, and you're right. I did walk in a little later. I did hear what as he was going element by element, that they wanted to start with the center field, as it were, as a prototype. But I just wanted to know, because I didn't see it addressed here, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear anything being said about, again, those gaps that we see here on the map, that we were going to be creating. Right, so obviously I would like to see those fields to not have all the dirt that they're having now, and to be actually playable for our other families, again, to enjoy a nice night out with their families or with their friends.
Perfect. And I think that this is one of the purposes of tonight's workshop, right, is to get kind of that feedback from each and every one of you to, because this is, for a while still, it's going to be a work in progress, right? We're right now talking about it at the 30,000-foot level. Right, with just kind of like the skeleton of a vision of how we think we can get to a redevelopment of the park and handle the majority of the issues that we think are needed there. Afterwards, especially after the construction documents are developed, that is really what's going to give us the more precise roadmap to get to the end result.
Understood. I just, again, wanted to ask the question about whether we had contemplated anything on those particular areas or not. But, my feedback would be that, again, and as somebody that had promised that whatever we did with Optimist moving forward would allow more of our families to participate on that field without having to join the Optimist Club, that is a priority for me. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I may, through you.
Mr. Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Can you please remind me, I cannot remember, what is an airnasium?
In essence, the basketball court is just covered by a roof. It's got fans,
Is it enclosed?
No. It's an open-aired structure.
So it's just a roof?
Correct.
Okay. And then I guess it alludes back to Ms. Lucis's question during public comment. Looking at the proposed budget, I get it. Like the manager said, it's a 30,000-foot level, but it is helpful sometimes to have some of the more major items that we have some form of a price tag on, to have it itemized. So I'm assuming that the airnasium is under sport court improvement, under
Correct.
750,000. But it would be good to know that, hey, out of that 750, 500,000 is the airnasium versus, maybe it's only 50,000, and then now it's worth it. Whereas if it's 500,000, I'm thinking it's too pricey. So something like that, as well as things like the the restrooms, how, since they're prefab, there should be a price tag on them. Where? Okay, so, okay, sorry, I was looking at the right side. But that's then the cost for one, 461?
For the restroom building, yes.
Uh-huh.
That's the restroom building and the pad that it's going to go on,
The
the
concrete
connection for
pad and all that
utilities
stuff.
and so
And the
forth.
utilities, more,
Yeah,
that-
things like that, as much as possible. I get it, we're still at 30,000 foot level, but we're trying to determine, you know, whether we want to push something like this forward. Outside of that, I noticed there's a carry forward transfer. Is that last year's, or is this an assumed amount for this year?
yeah.
Hadn't gotten there.
We're gonna get to there.
Okay.
Any other questions before we talk numbers and budget?
Through the chair. Thank you very much.
Councilman Garcia.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, guys, thank you for putting this together. I know it's been, difficult to try to come up with something that works for everybody. Couple questions that I have. I like the approach of the initial, most important infrastructure, right? Which is the P1, P2, and P3. As far as airnasium, things like that, that's pushed back, right? And I think it should be pushed back. That's something that if we can do and there is money to do it, fine, but that's not the priority, right? The priority is the fields, the lighting, the earthworks, and things like that. My concern would be the more we push it back, the more expensive it will be through inflation. Construction now is not going to be same cost as construction 3 or 4 years from now. As far as ball field work and the lights and the infrastructure earthwork, it's true. If you build the field, have all the equipment there to build the field, and then have to come back the next year, and then for each individual field, that's just an additional cost. I mean, you're saving 20, 30, 40% of construction just having all the equipment there and doing all the fields. So what I would like to see perhaps is another option of, instead of the first 3 phases, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, condensing it into a 2-year plan. And if we're going to hit the fields, let's hit the fields totally. Because we're going to have construction in that park for the next 4 or 5 years. Trust me, the residents are going to be like, when is this going to get done, right? So I think we can do it at the cost that you've put together here, kind of condensing it into a 2-year plan for the main basic things that we need. As far as airnasium, things like that, honestly, guys, that's, our poles are falling apart, our backstops are falling apart, it's terrible. So let's get the basics done, right? So that's my idea would be to do that. Also, as far as the plan I'm looking at, it kind of looks like the initial plan of the first, we had 4 choices for the bond. That initial one, without the bathroom, or with the bathroom, is that kind of is it based on that first one, number 1 or 2 before? We had choices for the bonds.
So the site plan and the amenities included are meant to simulate the actual option that went out with the bond,
Okay, number 1.
which was, when we say number 1, there's a lot, but it's,
Well, the first, we had 3 choices. We had the $19 million plan, there was a $9 million plan.
and then the 26. This was based off the 19.5.
Okay, but there was a plan that didn't move the fields around.
Oh, yes. So the original, that was option 1. Yes,
Option
it was
1.
10 million.
Okay, so this is based on the
It's
option 1 plan?
based on the majority of the amenities, not all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm trying to do is also save money on plans, because do we have the cost of the redoing the plans here in this presentation?
Right now, it is estimated preliminary looking at what's remaining and the level of construction, since it's not going to be the complete redesign. It's right now anticipated to be around 300,000.
Okay. $300,000 for a plan that's basically option 1, am I correct?
It is for all of the actual construction to be incorporated part of this phase.
I guess my question is, can we save money by, reusing those plans for option 1?
We never got to construction.
Yeah.
We have only gotten to
They were just
It
conceptual.
was just conceptual, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is not conception, this is plan and everything put together?
Yes, this is the entirety of all the construction documents that are going to eventually be needed for permitting and so forth.
Okay, I guess my question would be, any work that we did prior that can we incorporate into this that can save some money as far as engineering or any things that we did, site reviews or anything like that we already did for option 1? If we can reuse that, I'm just trying to save money.
Some of that information is being used in here in the
Okay.
cost estimation. right? Because when they said about backstops, okay, yeah, we took the things, even though the fields were going to be in different directions, he's taken information that was from that original and then used it in some of these cost estimations. And it's the same, right now, it's the same firm that did the conceptuals before to go now and go right into construction drawings and everything is going to be much cheaper than bring somebody in.
Yeah,
to
no,
start
perfect.
from
Makes
scratch.
sense, yeah, 100%. As far as costs, what's the contingency, 10%, 15, 20% on?
And again, we have not gotten that far
That
yet.
far, okay.
Because
That precise.
one of the things here with this plan, right, and again, I go back to, right now, we're at the 30,000 foot level. We'd like to bring it in for a landing, right?
Sure.
So at the 30,000 foot level, one of the things to bring it in for a landing is to develop our, if we get concurrence from this council that the idea at the 30,000 foot level makes sense, then we would move forward with, and on page 14, you'll see that when Jeremy starts to talk about the budgets. The section on the left-hand side is with current money that we believe currently exists in the capital account now, together with, and I'll explain that, with a transfer from carry forward, okay, and the logic behind that.
Okay.
The columns on the right-hand side would be from years 2 and on, right? And that is where there's more flexibility, and that is why we need the construction document. So in these large-scale construction projects, you have to develop what the plans are, and then the engineers can develop what's called an OPC, an opinion of probable cost, right? So once we have the plans, because otherwise it's just conceptuals, and there's too much wiggle room, and that's why the dollars are not as solid. So by doing it the way that we're proposing and developing the construction plans, you now have a very clear roadmap as to where we're going, right? We can develop an OPC. We can even say, okay, if this element, you're not going to do it until the 4th year out, we can incorporate inflationary factors to tell you what these things are. And to your point, once we get past year 1 with current money, and we're going to put it before you or this council to consider trying to develop some sort of budgets for years 2, 3, 4, 5, however many years you want to spread the cost out over. Now you're going to have the ability to do that, and you have the ability to shift and say, okay, we want to do it element by element, we want to do it field by field. All of those flexibilities will be done, but they really can't be done in a clear-cut, solid way until we develop the construction documents.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I would consider moving the ball field work to the second year, and doing it all together, because the cost of doing it separate, the backstops, the fencing. I know you want to have a field 5. It's just going to add to I believe it's going to add to the cost if we push it to the 3rd year. I understand the 1st year because of what you're talking about, but I would flip the script on the ball field work and just get it all done.
The reality is anything we push out to year 3, it's going to cost more
Exactly.
in year 3 than so
the main crust of the work, the hardest work, is going to be the ball fields, the fencing, the dugouts. I mean, the lighting already exists. You don't have to redo the electricity. Is that correct? You're not digging.
Yeah, it's reconnecting
Exactly.
the connections and adding the fixtures.
Exactly. Okay. So but the ball field work is the heaviest work, the most expensive work. The more we push it back in the process, the more expensive it's going to be for the residents. It's just going to, inflation is going to add 10, 15% to the cost. So what I would ask my colleagues to consider is moving the ball field work closer to the second year, and actually making it a 3-year process at the maximum, to prevent what would the 4, 5, 6 year. If we push it to 5 or 6 years, guys, it's just the cost is going to skyrocket when it comes to the end.
To clarify, the P1, P2, P3, P4, that's phase 1, phase 2. That's not
Priority.
year 1.
That's priority.
Or priority 1,
Yes.
priority. It's not year. This isn't a 7-year plan.
No, that's priority.
But
Just
but we're
the
going to
element.
break it up into
yeah, you
3
can
years.
group these however you want.
However we want.
The will is to put money behind it.
Sure.
Because I understand in terms of priority, having the sports field. I actually agree with Councilmember Garcia in that the ball field work is probably, it's the densest in terms of money, and it's probably visually to our residents the most dramatic change. But at the same time, I also understand why the LED sports lights would go ahead, because number one, they're an overall cost savings, and number two, we got a couple that are apparently still on the verge of falling down. But definitely, yes, you know, the ball field work should be a very close third.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Hersberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, I just want to be clear. So the 1.7 is year one, but the 4.9 is the remaining. So the total budget is really, we're at 6.6.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
And it could,
It
once
could
again,
change.
very preliminary, very over the
Right.
top, but yeah, just around 7.
You know, one of the big things for me, which you touched on, is obviously where's the money, but the savings on the changing of the lights. Because I remember, I don't know when, but we had a discussion about the lighting, and the cost for the lighting was pretty significant. I remember the savings long term would be pretty significant. So for me, that's a number that I have to really see, because, you know, 6.6 is obviously a lot better than what we were talking, not we, but prior council was talking about, and obviously the residents rejected. But it's still a lot of money, and with our budget, it's still. Yeah, but you can show us where the money is, but yeah, it's tough.
100%, and it goes like the point that Councilmember Garcia made a moment ago, like the airnasium. The airnasium is a standalone element. We could do that in year 10 or 15. We may never get to it, right? But quantifying it here, then the council can year by year make a decision on what are the elements. Some of these are indispensable, right? Like the drainage, the backstops, those kinds of things. But there are some things that are more flexible, and they can be maybe saved over 2 or 3 years and then done in a fourth year. Those kinds of, that's the flexibility that I think this methodology provides the council in your decision making.
Right, and before we make any decisions, that's what we need. We need to see that, obviously, item by item, and I also agree with Councilmember Garcia that there's we got to look at the cost savings of engineering, right? Being proactive with the setup fees and how it might make sense to try to just get one thing out of the way, the biggest thing out of the way first, and then move on. But obviously, my biggest concern is where you're going to find, because once we use these funds, the funds are gone. So now we got to replenish these funds every year.
Correct.
Okay.
Through the chair.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Jeremy, first and foremost, great presentation so far, but I do have a few questions just at the point that we are. Will the students from Miami Lakes Middle have access to the facilities during the construction phase of Field 5?
Yes, currently they are actually staying pretty much within their new fenced-in area.
Okay.
A lot of PE isn't like it used to be freely out in the fields. At the most, the school uses for some of their extracurricular activities and their athletics, they'll use the church field, which is that open space to the south, and then they'll use Field 1 when they have softball season and so forth. So Field 5, it really isn't on their immediate use. The only potential impact that maybe I can foresee is Our Lady of the Lakes does have some of their games that are on Field 5, but Field 5 is a field that age division can be used, Field 3, Field 2, so we can modify and still keep play active. So right now I don't see any scholastic, anything impinging or kind of creating an issue for them.
Okay, that leads me to my next question. Besides the Field 5 and the field, what other portions of Optimist Park does Miami Lakes Middle use? Basketball courts, tennis courts?
Basketball courts, tennis courts, they every now and then, if they have a tennis background teacher, they do have a tournament every now and then. I don't think we've had it in the past 2 years. So they're okay. So it's kicking up now. So yeah, the tennis courts, it's very short-term use.
But they are used by Miami Lakes Middle.
They are used by Miami Lakes Middle. And then you will have during cross country, they would use basically the exterior of the 5 main fields.
Okay.
As a cross-country course.
Considering the usage by Miami Lakes Middle, is there a contingency to reach out to Miami-Dade County Public Schools to help fund some of the improvements, since they are using it as well? Speaking of it, think of it in commercial real estate as a tenant improvement. When somebody moves in, the landlord gives some money to help them improve the space. Maybe Miami-Dade County Public Schools would be open to co-sponsoring some of the funds to, to improve certain aspects of the park that they use.
Yeah, and I guess we hadn't gotten there yet in this presentation.
Okay.
There's a lot of engagements
Okay.
with a lot of our partners,
Yeah.
including Miami-Dade County Public Schools.
Okay.
We have an agreement with them currently that has some issues that have to be discussed,
Okay.
our joint use agreement. So there's a lot of engagements. That's why I say we're really, really, really early on in this process.
Okay.
But anybody that we can convince or, reach out to help us offset some of these costs, we will.
Okay.
Up to now, I could tell you that when we were in these discussions over the last 6 years that I've been here, there's been no appetite on their part to participate financially. They've been good partners in other ways, but financial partnership, they have not, up to this point, been willing to do that.
Okay.
Now, some of the players over there at the school board are different today than they were when we first discussed this.
Right.
So that opinion may change, but up to now, there has been no appetite that we've seen for them to participate financially in this.
Okay, and referring back to what Councilmember Garcia said about doing it in a shorter period of time, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a stipulation from Miami-Dade County Public Schools that when we start a project, we have 12 months to complete whatever it is that we want to do?
That's another thing that, all of the elements that are contained in the joint use agreement, the JUA, are things that would have to be revisited. That's something that we would have to have a conversation with them about.
Okay. Now, two more questions. The last one is about the aeronasium. I'll just get it out of the way now. What's the benefit of the aeronasium?
Allowing play throughout rain, allowing play throughout extreme heat, also being able to add lights to the aeronasium allows us use after sundown. So it's continuity of programming, continuity of allowing even, as the mayor alluded to, any open play outside of just our programmed events as well.
Okay.
And it can be doubled. We also talked about it in some of the previous conversations, is it can double almost as a band shell too.
Okay, that's true. The year one current funds, every item that's on there, is that listed by order of priority?
No.
No?
As far as priority, the overall phase itself is the priority, and then the funding is just a breakdown.
Okay, I asked that because right now we have no idea what the carry forward fund is going to be. We're from what I've been told, we're going to find out somewhat next month, and then we'll know for sure in April. What happens if those carry forward funds are not available?
And I guess because we
keep
keep dancing around it. So let me just cut to the chase and talk about the budget, year one budget, right? So the left side of that slide, which talks about year one funding.
Exactly.
Currently, right now, as we speak, we have 1.269 million in the capital account for MLOP.
I see
It's
that,
been
yeah.
sitting there, gathering dust for probably way too long, right?
So why isn't it an interest-bearing account making
No.
this money?
It's in the right place. It's
Okay.
gathering interest, but I'm just saying that we haven't put it to use, and that's really the biggest purpose of tonight, is to get the improvements that are needed, at least something done at the park.
Okay.
But we don't want to do it haphazardly, right?
Right.
We want to do it in an organized fashion with a bigger vision in mind, and with a plan that this council can see a vision over the next few years to get us from point A to Z. So we currently have 1.269 in the MLOP capital account, all right? What we are proposing in the carry forward, and we don't have an exact number, okay? But the carry forward will be north of $1 million, okay? So in the year fiscal 22-23, in order to balance a budget that year, we took from the MLOP capital account $499,322. And that was the only way that year we were able to balance that year's budget. So what we are proposing is to take and restore that money back to the MLOP capital account for this first year budget. So if we are able to do that, then that will give us 1.769 to be able to use in year one, okay? Doing that, these are the elements that we talked about for the first year, which is the construction documents, the complete development of Field 5 as a prototype, shade structure, dugouts, fencing, irrigation, drainage, all of the elements for Field 5. We would also be doing, that it may be something that Councilmember Garcia will like, is we would be installing a rust kit on the pump in year one, so that all of the fencing, we won't have that constant staining of all of the, from the sprinklers, right? So from that point forward, it's an ongoing cost, because it's a rust kit, it's something that costs ongoing, but at least then that we've solved that problem moving forward. We would obviously put in the restroom building, which was a big part, especially for the younger kids that have to play in the coach pitch fields out on the southwest corner of the park, right? So the restroom facility would be in the center of the park and be accessible from basically all of the fields. And then those are the biggest elements for year one, and we can accomplish that, we believe, with what's currently in there, plus the transfer of moving the money that was removed from Miami Lakes Optimist Park 2 years ago and putting it back into that account. And with that, and I don't want to preview the carry forward because, you know, between now and when you see it at the March council meeting or leading up to the council meeting, there could be, some changes to it because we're still finalizing the numbers. But we believe it'll be north of $1 million, and we believe that a lot of the things that this council has expressed to us as being priorities to consider with the carry forward, we'll be able to fund with the remaining dollars in the carry forward. Things like litter control, things like, some,
Pocket park maintenance.
the pocket park maintenance, a couple of the, we probably will be able to fund the second and the final phase of the pocket park maintenance. So there's going to be funding there, and we're still developing, so I don't want to make promises. We're still developing our list of recommendations, but we believe that even making this transfer of restoring this money back to Miami Lakes Optimist, that will accomplish all of the goals that this council has laid out for us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manager.
And then again, the right side of that of this spreadsheet is, as Jeremy laid out, all of the other elements that then later, once we have construction documents, we can mix and match, and this council can decide. The construction documents and the engineering will give us some advice on sequencing, right? Because you're not going to work with something that then you got to come back to do some other element and destroy because with heavy equipment or what have you. So there's going to be a logical construction sequencing that they're going to give us information on, and we'll be able to. So from years 2 and on, once we have the construction documents, the planning for that and what's going to work best, whether it's element by element or field by field, that sequencing will be more exact once we have our construction documents with engineering advice and so forth. Does that make sense?
And with that, my presentation is complete. No, I believe there might have been, I
Through the
think,
mayor.
Councilman Quadra, yes.
So Councilmember Fernandez, then Cuadra Garcia, and then we'll restart the circuit if anyone has additional comments and questions.
Thank you, first of all, Jeremy. Thank you for the presentation. I'm super happy to see that this is finally something is being done. And I think that the number here is a lot more palatable for our residents. But and this is somebody who advocated for the bond. But I could see that, I think most of the residents would be okay. And I think not doing anything is definitely not on the table. Like, something has to be done. I do think some of the elements, well, first, I love the plan, the fact that it's flexible, because I think that would be important, and especially if we can bring in our partners like Optimist to get opinions from them and to see and to share in this, because maybe there is some ideas that they have that they might be able to bring to light and say, oh, this might be more important for now. Our kids are, are suffering here. So that might be something that we should do in the future as we get through this. But The last thing I would say is that at least for me, I think that and I could appreciate why you came up with this, because it's a means to get a bathroom there, and it's saving us money, but I think that a prefab bathroom is beneath the standards of our town, but that's just my opinion, and we can discuss that. So, thank you.
You think so?
Oh.
Councilman Cuadra Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank God that this is only a workshop. We keep coming back to this, and I agree with all of you. I know that all of you are really have a close call with this park, and that's understandable. I've played ball on it and so forth and so on. But I think that we need to remember, or at least consider, that we haven't fixed our sidewalks. We have plenty of broken sidewalks out there and tree issues. We haven't fixed that. And here we are fixing a park that's not priority number one. What is priority? Is safety priority, or is, again, I'm all for it. But as long as we don't allocate any funds from our taxpayers' dollars, remember, if it has to do with touching taxpayers' dollars, we're going to get a lot of constituents a little bit agitated again. I don't know if you all remember when it went to a vote, it didn't pass. So leaving that aside, this is not a priority. Our priority should be a safety issue that hasn't been fixed, which are our sidewalks. So let's be very careful. And like I said, thank God that this is only a workshop and that we are going to be talking about it. So let's be very careful on what we do. Thank you.
Through the chair.
All right, we're now in the second round. Who'd like to go?
Through the chair.
Okay, so Councilmember Garcia, wait, before you start,
Sure.
Just to get a cue going. Okay, I see the Vice Mayor's hand. Councilman Herzberg, or is your hand up? Okay. Councilman Sanchez. Okay, so Councilman Garcia, the Vice Mayor, and then Councilman Sanchez.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're saying, Councilman. But I believe that we can have multiple priorities, right? Sidewalk repair, 100%. That is, you can't have our residents tripping and falling, 100%. But our parks, our police, those are the priorities and what those are what residents want. They want clean streets, good infrastructure like sidewalks, and they deserve great parks. What I'm looking at here is the basic minimum of standard for parks in the county, in Florida and in the country. There's nothing here that is extravagant. Everything here is the basic minimum of what parks should be in 2025. So parks are a priority, of course. The residents made it clear they don't want to spend that much money on the parks. But 40% said, yeah, we want it. And most of the people that voted no was for the cost. Most people want something done at Optimist Park. I think we can get it all done. But to ignore Optimist Park another year, it's 2025. We incorporated in 2020. We did some improvements, absolutely, to a quarter of the park. But the rest of the park, guys, enough is enough with putting this aside and putting this aside and putting this aside. If you're up here and you don't believe that our parks are priority, then you and I are always going to have a discussion and an argument about that. We're always going to disagree. And I believe that the residents believe that parks are a priority. But we can also have, of course, our streets and our sidewalks and our police department, of course, multiple priorities. So I would just ask all our new members that are here and those of us that have been here before, we have a real opportunity now to finally get something done that is up to the standards, as Councilman Fernandez says, up to the standards of Miami Lakers. So I would applaud the staff and thank you for all the time you put into this and all the time you put into this the last years. I think there's a real opportunity here to get it done and get it done right. So I appreciate this workshop, and I think we can do it by prioritizing your priorities, sir. I think we can do sidewalks as well. And it's not one or the other. I believe that parks are the key, just like our pocket parks are the key. They're the reasons why residents love this town, and the reason they come here, and the reasons why values of homes are so expensive, and the waiting list to get apartments here so long is because we have so many pocket parks and we have so many beautiful parks, and we let that go. We won't see it now, but the next generation who are in the council, next residents, we'll see a degradation of the amenities here in the town of Miami Lakes. So I appreciate the plan. Let's work out the details. There's a lot of details to work out, I understand, but I think there's enough experience up here and enough will to get it done. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Vice Mayor?
All right, I have a couple points to bring up. Number one, just to confirm, over on the left-hand side, I see 442,750 for lighting Field 1. So is that just the wooden replacements and not including the lighting upgrades
No.
to Field 5?
That is the pole, the connections that are going to be severed and reconnected, and the new fixtures themselves.
Okay, so the 442 does not include the upgrades to the lights around Field 5. That's included under the ball.
Correct.
The ball field 5 improvements, 551,000.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
It's one of our largest fields, so the lighting, there's more poles than on a smaller field, and it's,
I just wanted clarification on that. Now, more on policy matters and specifically as to the financial side of this. Look, I said it about the what was it? The senior center capital account getting rated for the purposes of our budget during the last budget cycle. I'll say the same about the MLOP. Capital accounts should not be rated to fund our operating deficit. It's just bad budgeting. There's an accountant in the room. I know we're a bunch of lawyers up here now, but take heed from the accountant. It's not good budgeting. So if what we're being told is that we have enough money in the carry forward, obviously pending finalization, if we have enough money in our carry forward to restore that money, then it should be properly applied to restoring it, because the way I see it, budgets are a promise. They're a promise to the people, right? Because if they are not, if you could just budget and then take it away later, what's the point of them coming up for public comment if we could just change it willy-nilly? That is one of the reasons why the seniors showed up here extremely upset when the money for their senior center was going to be taken and stripped from them. Similarly here, I understand, the complexities and the difficulty of balancing a budget, but when possible, you should not be using capital accounts to fund ongoing expenses. So I see funding the 499,322 as actually righting a wrong. So that's neither here nor there. I do agree with Councilmember Garcia, and then as to other points that were made, again, I do also agree that you can have multiple priorities, and we will have the opportunity to explore those, I think, in greater detail once we get to the carry forward discussion. It's important to note that because this is money that was already taken from the capital account, in reality, this is money that we should have had there in the first place. We should be able to say today that we have 1.769 in the capital account. We should be able to say that, but due to budgeting practices of the past, we can't say that. So I think we should correct that. Lastly, I did want to ask, Jeremy, how much would this plan cost if we didn't do it in phases? If we implemented this entire thing, but we said, no, we're going to give you, we have $5 million in the capital account. Go. Get it done all in one go without phasing. How much would it cost? Because it's my understanding that in the world of construction, staging is one of the most major expenses. And it sounds here like we're going to stage, unstage, stage, unstage, stage, unstage. And that I do see as a colossal waste of money. So has any estimate been done on that front?
yeah, we probably couldn't answer that question until we have the completion of construction documents. But I'm no contractor, but I play one on TV. Now that I've been here for 6 years and dealing with public works, I've gotten a little bit versed in that. When you're talking about staging, I think that really, really does apply when you're talking about heavy equipment and a lot of materials. And so some of these phases will have an impact, and that's why we've been talking about doing it, like for instance, all the earthwork. That's heavy equipment. That's a lot of staging. That's a lot of where that makes a difference, right? But if, for instance, if you're going to do fencing, there's probably not a lot of heavy equipment involved in just fencing. They bring all the fence and a bunch of guys are putting in the fencing. So I think it depends phase by phase. But once we have construction documents, to answer your question, I think that's where we can say that we can come up with an OPC that says, okay, if we did it all today, what would that number be? And if we did it in phases, what would that number be? By default, because if we're going to have a phase that we're going to project out in year 3 or 4, we're going to put in an inflationary factor, because even the cost of materials, cost of labor, and everything else, 3 years out, 4 years out, is going to be more than it is today. So when we get the construction documents set, then we can give you a more exact answer to your question. But the answer is, without a doubt, it'll be cheaper if you did it all up front, from the beginning, without a doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And then the last point I wanted to make, actually kind of echoing some of the sentiments the mayor made a little while ago with regard to the open play areas. Mine actually relates a little bit more specifically to the walking paths. For lack of a better term, there are none. There's very few. It's not connected. You can't jog around Optimist Park without either leaving the park, like going onto the sidewalk along 67th, or just jogging on grass. The exercise stations are a great idea, and I'm only saying this because this is a workshop, and we are talking about our likes, dislikes. Obviously this is a field that tailors a lot to organized sport, but as the mayor suggested, it doesn't tailor that much to the average resident who just wants to use it. So for me, the walking path and the exercise trail is an important factor. I'm not going to support improvements that don't include that. So that concludes my remarks.
Councilman Sanchez.
So for the future portions of this project, the $4.963 million, what's the funding source for that? Where would the funds for that come from?
Those are to be determined. Those are commitments. That's why we were putting it before you to see if there's an appetite, whether to consider something like what the vice mayor is saying, is developing something, whether it be, and we'll come back to you with that at a future workshop and give you these are different options. And that's what we did when we were talking about the original redevelopment, right?
Okay.
We came and we brought our financial consultant in, and she talked about different ways of going about it. The general obligation bonds, which is what the council decided to put forward before the voters at that time. But there's other options, other dedicated, other types of financing. Or if you do the pay as you go, this council is going to have to say, okay, we're going to dedicate $500,000 from our general revenues every year towards this redevelopment.
And it would take 10 years. Plus
Right. Obviously, it'll take longer.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can come up and say, we're gonna take out a loan. Right. And there are other loans that are not general obligation bonds that are more complicated. Right. There are other loans, and then you say, okay, we're going to pay the debt service on those loans, with this amount of money, or target a specific revenue that we already have towards it. And so that's going to be less money in the pot for other things, but those are the kind of questions that this council, unfortunately for you, fortunately for me, we get to ask the questions and you guys get to answer them.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
But we're going to help guide you, and we're going to provide you options, and we're going to provide you guidance, and we're going to give you as much information as we think that you need. And if you need more, we'll go out and get it. We'll get you all the information that you need to make an informed, sound decision.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my only remaining question.
Councilman Fernandez, and then Councilman Hersberg.
Oh, it's just a comment. Thank you, Mayor. I just think that we should remember, I know that the cost is something that, of course, the bottom line is it's the most important thing, right? How much is it costing us? But I invite you guys, and you probably know, and those that don't should visit our neighboring parks, our neighboring cities that have parks. And it's embarrassing. I really do think that Optimist Park is embarrassing. So I think that we need you know, it's clear we need to do something, and I think that this is a really good path going forward.
Thank you, Mayor. So to try to get to the construction cost of, for example, like the Vice Mayor was saying, is, I mean, it might be cheaper in the long term to just do it. With inflation, with increasing cost, there is a possibility that the math would work out to say, just get the financing, do it all now, because over 10 years it's going to be a lot. It's going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. Literally, it could be $1 million, $2 million savings. How do we get that, the number of, do we have to approve you guys to move forward with the plans so we can actually get to the real numbers and determine the best way to potentially move forward with this? Is that what has to be done?
The next slide, actually in Jeremy's presentation, is going to talk about the next steps, right? So where do we go from here? I guess.
Right,
Really,
but I guess my question is, for me, I agree, Councilman Fernandez, I agree, Mayor, the park, I've always said the park needs to be improved. Personally, I wasn't out campaigning for it, but I was for the bond, even though I did feel that it was too much. If the past council would have gone down, I don't think we would, at a $10 million range, I honestly don't think we'd be here talking about this. I think there would be construction in the park right now. But that being said, for me, it's a numbers thing, all right? So I see that council approval, but what can we approve construction documents first? Because do you need us to approve phase 1 first? Because I want to dissect this.
well, you can't approve anything tonight.
No, not
Right.
tonight. I mean, whenever you bring this forward to us next.
But Jeremy's next, click to the next slide, Jeremy, because on page 15 of your presentation, your handout, and also this next slide, you know, just what we're looking for when we say here in the next step, number 1 is council approval, is not the minutia, right? But it's just, you know, the general idea of we want to redevelop this park. We think that the design of leaving the ball fields in their current location is the right one. We're in the ballpark as far as reasonable numbers, and now go out and do a lot of the due diligence. First is, now we're going to consult with our program partners like the Optimist Club, the Miami Lakes Middle School, Our Lady of the Lakes. They use we're going to consult with them to get similar input, like several of you have already given us input about the walking trails or this element or the open play area. That kind of input is important. Then we got to go have a conversation with the school board, right? They're obviously indispensable partner in this whole, you know, conversation. So we have to have a conversation with them, and if we can reach agreement with the school board, then I think would be the next step to move forward with the development of the construction documents, and that's where we would be putting that before you for approval so we can move forward with that. So those would be the sequential series of steps to over the next.
Why don't we let Jeremy finish then the presentation before we take a final round of questions and comments? That way, maybe that'll get us out of here a little faster. Jeremy?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so just continuing on that key next steps as the manager had already started there. So once we complete those construction documents, we will be able to look at the OPC. We'll ask for the variations of both phasing it over a certain amount of time and or just completing it at one go, and what is our cost savings there. And that'll definitely help. It seems that it'll help the council go ahead and make a decision moving forward. Once we have that, then it becomes, if needed, establish the budget, both immediate and future, and then commence implementation, start permitting and construction, and then it's play ball after that. So with that, now comes the fun part.
Okay, Councilman Sanchez first, and then the Vice Mayor.
What's OPC?
Opinion
Opinion
of
of
probable
probable
cost.
cost.
Got it.
It's gonna be, but it's gonna be one of your more accurate estimates as opposed to these numbers.
Okay. Now, you put out that the plans were about $300,000. That average, is that from historical projects from other municipalities? Or have you reached out to architects and have figured out the design is gonna cost that much already?
That's working directly with our design firm.
Okay.
And talking to them. And also, that amount is currently what's still within their contract. So that is what they still have within the design contract from the original 2018 agreement.
So we wouldn't put out an RFP for design because we already have an in-house design okay.
Correct.
Okay. For everything else, you would put an RFP out?
For the construction portions, yes.
Right, okay.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was a brief question actually relating to something Councilmember Sanchez and Councilmember Herzberg said earlier. how long did it take to build up the 1.7 that we have in the cap account?
How long did it take to?
To build up,
to
it was presumably installments. You put in 100,000 here, 200,000 there. How long did it take to get to 1.7?
It's a good job. It's a good homework for historical purposes.
It is, and here's why.
It's gonna predate me for sure on the park side.
Well, of course, it would have been through impact fees and all that stuff, but how much were we putting in each year, and how long?
It came from different sources over time. Some of it was general fund money, some of it was open space, not open space, park improvement, impact fees. So it's come from different sources, but we can develop that backstory.
Because it kind of does
A long
answer.
time. The answer, a long time.
It quasi answers Councilman Sanchez's question as to, how are we funding this? It's basically going to be the same way. You got to, scratch and claw for these funds. It's going to take some time. And if we did want to do something like myself and Councilmember Herzberg were saying of just do it in one go, then that would presumably mean delaying all improvements for 5 years or more. And then that's probably an issue, because I do know that the fields are in very deteriorated conditions, and I don't know that it can wait that long. But I just wanted to ask that, how long did it take? That's a good homework, I think, to bring to us in the future.
Here's a forward-looking answer to your question. Instead of looking backwards, I want to look forward. And we currently have, our impact fee structure is, we don't have our own Town of Miami Lakes impact fee ordinance. We work under the umbrella of the Miami-Dade County impact fee ordinance, right? Which has certain things that they do. The way it works is when contractors are going to take out their permits, this money goes to the county. Every quarter, the county gives us money for park open space to acquire new parkland, park improvement impact fees, and law enforcement impact fees. Those impact fees, for instance, for law enforcement, that's how we have built out our LPR network. So right now, currently, there's not a lot of open space in the town, right? So for us, park improvement is probably more important than park open space, right? But we can't use, and I hope I don't lose you, we can't use park open space money for park improvement because we're working under the rules that's set by the county. So one of the things that we're gonna have a conversation with you about during the carry forward discussion is doing a study, fund a study to look and see about the development of our own impact fee ordinance that we can tailor it. Because right now the county's impact fee ordinance is based on the entire Miami-Dade County. We have different needs. We have different things that are important to this council, to our residents. So we're going to have a conversation with you about funding a study, which is the first step to the development of our own ordinance, is doing this impact fee study so that we can tailor. And I foresee that having a parks impact fee that would give this council the flexibility to use for acquisition of new parkland or park improvement to our existing facilities, our existing parks, give you that flexibility. But that's going to, so I believe that that's going to be one source, and I guess that goes back to the question that you asked, Councilmember Sanchez, is that could be one major source in the future, being able to put money behind future development of this MLOP if we don't find a way of doing it all up front.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. My last point is just once the rest of the colleagues are done, Mayor, I would recommend just reopening public comment now that they've had the opportunity to hear the presentation, hear our discussions, if they wanted to have any extra
Yeah, I was going to
input. And
propose
we have
it
more
as
people.
well when we get there. But first and foremost, so on this round of questioning, was it Councilman Herzberg that you heard? Okay, anybody else? Angelo? No? Okay, so I'll close, before I make the motion to go ahead and reopen public comment, I'll close with this. I agree with the statement that was made, Councilman Sanchez, you're right, you did have a follow-up.
With regards to Councilman Cuadra Garcia's request about funds for sidewalks, do we have allocated funds already for sidewalk repair? And if so, how much of the required sidewalk repair, what percentage do we currently have allocated to repair that?
We have multiple sources.
Yeah.
Gas tax goes towards sidewalks. We now also have FP&L franchise fee that goes towards sidewalks. And so that's going to be one of the allocations that you're going to look at with the carry forward is when we first, the FP&L franchise fee, when we first, then council member, now Mayor Dieguez, passed an ordinance or proposed an ordinance that the council passed, which dealt with the FP&L franchise fee, everything over a certain dollar amount, everything over $1.275 million had to go to infrastructure to very specific defined categories, one of which is sidewalks, okay? So every year, at the beginning, we didn't know how much we were going to be getting from FP&L franchise fee over and above the 1.275. So my chief financial officer convinced me not to forecast it and budget it, but the first 2 or 3 years to wait until we saw what the experience was and then allocate it mid-year like now during the carry forward. This past budget, this council approved a budget that now for the first time forecasts FP&L franchise fee. But we still had last year's FP&L franchise fee that now has to be allocated. So FP&L franchise fee, gas tax, there are several sources of money for sidewalk repair. Now you're going to, in the carry forward, you're going to be looking at what the amount is. So there's going to be money there for, we're going to recommend roadway resurfacing, more money towards sidewalk. There's already been money allocated towards sidewalks. Now we're going to allocate more money. The exact dollars, I don't have that off the top of my head, but there are sources of money that are dedicated towards sidewalk repair.
But based on what you're saying, right now, we don't have enough to repair every sidewalk that needs repair.
I can't say that for sure.
Okay.
You know, because every day, right now, as we speak, there's a root growing that's lifting up a sidewalk. So it's a moving target.
Right.
Right? So several years ago, when we were talking about the FP&L franchise fee, I was asked, and I put before the council at that time, if we were to have enough money for sidewalk repair, resurface every roadway at the time interval that is needed, trim every tree when it's needed, repair and replace every light when it was a certain number, right? And at that time, we decided to leave the franchise fee. It was during the transition from being under the county's FPL franchise fee to establishing our own. And that conversation was had. But there's a number out there. At that time, it was $1.2 million to do all of that infrastructure as we needed, but then that required moving the franchise fee to 6%, which is what every other city in Dade County has. We're the only one that has it less than 6%. So that's, but there's a number, but we do put money towards all that infrastructure, including sidewalks, and gas tax and FPL franchise fee are the two main sources for it.
Good to go.
All right, so with that, I'll close out before we go to reopen public comments by saying that I want to thank staff for putting this together and the manager, and I want to thank my colleagues for being present and participating tonight, as well as members of the public. I agree with Councilman Hertzberg that if this was the plan, this probably would likely have passed in 2022, because among many opponents of the plan that I spoke to that had their kids at the park, actually, 10 million was around the number that they were willing to accept, but not higher than that. And I think what this shows us is that we didn't have to explore, and I understand that the trend with these parks is now to have that cloverleaf design and everything else, but this is a plan that does not reduce the total capacity of our parks. As far as I can see, it still leaves actually room for us to add capacity for residents that just want to go there to play, right? So I think this is headed in the right direction for me, but I just want to remind everybody that this is only very preliminary. We're just hearing from staff what they are finding. There are many steps to go. This is just still a fact-finding mission. We now have some information that we can go back and speak with the constituents about as far as what they think about this plan. And you know, just also continue to get information, ask questions, and gather information. I do also want to staff, I specifically want to point out to make sure that when we get the OPC, that these are not fuzzy numbers, that these are as close to reality as possible. Because I still remember when the number was looking at something like 25 million, and then all of a sudden when Jeff got in there with everybody and the number came down magically to 19 and a half, right? Because, you know, the numbers in the fencing was not actually closer to reality, et cetera. So make sure that when you do come back to us, It would save us a lot of heartache and you a lot of heartache if when we do get that OPC, it is as close to true numbers as possible, and not inflated, because then that just builds further mistrust as well when we're dealing with the public. So, you know, with that, again, this is a good first step to have a discussion about what the future could look like here, and Jeremy, go ahead.
The one question, just for clarification, and I know, Mayor, you brought it up on the open green spaces. Also initially anticipated in the site plan under the current JUA was the improvements of the fields just north of the school, which are what used to be portables. Just for, as we continue this process, would you say that your open field space enhancements, should we look back into that, developing that portion?
Why not? Because look, my biggest gripe with this has always been, as somebody that's lived here for all his life, right, that is a park that I felt has not been mine, right? My parents pay taxes in it. I'm paying taxes for it now. And yet it has been a field that I had to dodge staff when I wanted to play there, or that other families have had to be kicked off of. So as we're paying $1 million plus every year for maintenance of that field, but yet unless we join the Optimist program, I'm not able to participate. And I don't care that it's a minimal fee, right? At the end of the day, it's the town's park. You know, for all intents and purposes, even though we only own the northern 8 acres, et cetera, you know, whatever, we're the ones that maintain it, we take care of it, et cetera. So, you know, anything that allows the average resident to actually enjoy that park, I'm all in favor of. And I think, frankly, would actually increase the likelihood of something happening there. So yeah, talk to them about it. If you need me to call up school board members, whatever the case might be, by all means, use me for that. You know, but with that, I move to reopen public comments so that the members of the public can go ahead and speak. Oh, okay. Are you sure? No, that's true. How convenient. You know, we're gonna have to dock their attorney's fees. With that said, I'm gonna reopen it though, but I am gonna put a limit on it though, because obviously we all have to go places. So, for 3 minutes, any members of the public that wish to come back up and address the council, please feel free. Claudia, Ed, do you want to come up? Okay, after Claudia, okay.
Okay. Claudia Lucis, 8220 Menteith Terrace. PTSD. Okay, here we go. You guys covered a couple of the things that I had questions about, in particular the funding sources, right? Where are we going to get funding for this? Councilman Cuadra Garcia brings up sidewalks. Kind of confused why it is that since 2020 I have complained about a broken sidewalk by one of the pocket parks by my house that many people use, including elderly people who are walked there, okay, by some of their nurses, and it's still in disrepair. It's been 5 years. I was actually going to bring it up. I haven't had a chance to send you an email because I was kind of busy. But I don't know, can we take out a loan for sidewalks? Since we're willing to take out loans for everything else? Again, we come back to prioritizing what needs to be prioritized in this town. Why don't you go to veterans? Go look at the conditions, okay, of the exercise equipment there. We build, they come. We can't maintain. Oh my God, I sounded like Biden at that point, sorry. We can't maintain, okay? We can't maintain it, and yet we're talking about building something else. Of great concern is the MOU, the famous MOU, the JUA, that we knew was going to be a problem years ago. Those of us that have come up here and have, you know, talked about the park extensively, tried to put it on everybody's radar. You submitted a JUA, you know, MOU with a $20 million park project, which is exactly what the school board expects, which is what the voters voted down. Regardless of what it was, 60-40, okay, you lost. The voters spoke. Do you want improvements? Of course, okay, reasonable improvements. But I feel that we're simply circumventing what the voters tried to tell you, which is they don't want this animal. They don't want it. Take care of what our needs are. Why am I still waiting on sidewalk repairs 5 years later? It's 2020, COVID time, when I started walking. It's still messed up. Is it my job to have to go and check out the sidewalks? Because if it is, let me know. town manager, and I'll apply, okay? And I'll be your sidewalk,
Hold on,
person.
Ed, hold on, hold
But reality is, okay, we have these issues. I have another concern. I was here at the meeting when everybody sat here and you had people from the school board, you had the attorneys, you had reps from everyone, you had the town, and I distinctly can tell you that Optimist Park said that they wanted all or nothing. So for those of you who are talking about Optimist, okay, and there are witnesses here that will tell you it was all or nothing. They didn't want phases. There was no safety concerns at that point in time. There was nothing to worry about, okay? Just to kind of finish it up and wrap it up, I know this isn't a $7 million project. We all know that. Because ultimately, you still have a $20 million, okay, addendum, amendment, exhibit, whatever you want to call it, attached to a document that is sitting at Miami-Dade County School District. And that's what they're expecting. So we all know that this is the end game, okay? But again, where is the funding source? And why is it that we're not taking care of the things that really need to be taken care of? Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Councilwoman Verano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. Marilyn Ruano, 15515 Northwest 83rd Avenue. Deja vu is an understatement. This is more of the same. This will not be a $6 million project. This will be a $10 million project if we are lucky. This is not what the community is asking for. I was present during those conversations where the Optimist Club said, there's no safety concerns anymore. We want it all, or we don't want it at all. It was actually Mr. Hamilton that told me that personally. So this gives me a lot of heartburn. My 86-year-old aunt fell in front of her house in Royal Oaks on a broken sidewalk that has been broken for years. And this council is lucky that she didn't sue the town because that generation doesn't sue. There are pressing matters. I just knocked on doors, countless doors for days. You all just campaigned. How many people complained about the park and how many people complained about sidewalks? How many people complained about trees? What are the priorities in this community? Pulling a loan to pay for this is very disturbing to me. I have no problem using the $2 million that have been sitting there, that are burning a hole in our pocket, been sitting there forever. No different than the $300,000 from the development agreement that the EAB had pressing matters to attend to because the money couldn't sit in a bank account. So this money cannot sit in a bank account. What's the funding source? Councilmember Sanchez, the answer is none. There is no funding source. And that's the problem. That has always been the problem. This land doesn't belong to us. The children that use this park, some of them live in Miami Lakes, many of them do not. And the taxpayers of this community should not be burdened with a loan or a bond or anything of that nature until the rest of our primary problems are resolved. When you fix all the sidewalks, build the park. When you trim all the trees, build the park. When you have no more infrastructure concerns, no more potholes, no more other issues, build the park. When you fix the other parks, build the park. But I continue to get phone calls every day about exercise equipment that's broken, about children getting hurt on swings that are old, garbage cans that are in disrepair. When you fix all of that, then build this. Because it's true, the community is substandard, but this is not the area where it's substandard. There's tons of other areas. So like I said when I sat up there before, and I will continue to say it, do not build any more infrastructure that you cannot maintain when you cannot maintain the one that we have now. Keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Ed? And Hector, would you like to come up at some point, or? All right.
Good evening, Council. Eddie Blanco, 6290 Lake Champlain Terrace. I remember coming to this council when we did a rollback rate, and I said, y'all, that's a mistake, because our town, and I agree with some of the comments, we need to do better in terms of sidewalks, tot lots, that kind of stuff, but we want to keep lowering our taxes. So, I mean, you can't trim trees, put sod, fix parks, and not collect revenue. It just doesn't work that way. So I'm just here to support beautifying our town, doing it in the most cost-effective and efficient way possible, and building that park the way it needs to be done. I was there fighting for the park bond. I didn't think, spending all that kind of money was necessary, but if that was what it was going to take to get it done, I'm all for it. And like you said, Josh, the mayor, a lot of the people said, it was just too much money. But now we're here talking about spending a fifth of that, or maybe even half of that, and it's still not going to be right. The idea that we're going to have everything perfect infrastructure-wise before we can build a park is not going to happen. I can't imagine us doing that. I say you can't just keep rolling back taxes, and you can't keep spending the money with everything going up in cost and expect. The math isn't math, and you guys all understand that. So I'm here to support the park. Do it in as a tax efficient way as you possibly can, and get it done, because it's not just. The park does a lot more than just, it's not just for the people outside of the town. A lot of the residents enjoy it. It increases property values. It brings people into the park. I remember when we used to host a lot of things at that park and bring in people from all over. And those people, guess what they do? They shop, they buy restaurants, and they get inspired to move into this town, which drives up real estate values, which actually increases your taxable base, which then helps you support more improvement in the town, which is it's a nice spiral. You don't want to be like other cities around us who haven't invested in their infrastructure and have seen their values go down, or communities that have these fantastic parks that are pulling residents away from us. And it's a shame. You go to Weston or you go to Pembroke Pines or anywhere else that that is of the price standards of ours, and our parks are really embarrassing. So I encourage you to continue moving forward. I commend you for the work that the town is doing to figure out the right combination, and thank you.
Jim, Lynn, do you guys have anything to add?
My name's Jim Hamilton. I live at 8528 Glen Lane in Miami Lakes. I'm sorry, I apologize for being so late. We have baseball starting on Friday, and we're handling all the uniforms last night, and tomorrow night. So with that said, the Optimist Club basically appreciates your consideration of any improvements that the Parks Department deems appropriate financially and time-wise. I did not hear the presentation, but anything at all that can be done to improve the park is appreciated. And that's basically how we have always operated with the funds, whether it was the county or the city. But thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jim. Alexandra, you have anything to add for the Laker? All right, seeing no further public comments and there being no further business, we're adjourned.